I have asked many students this question: are you for or against the death penalty? For most, the response is quick and certain. They're against the death penalty. In all honesty, I'm pleased with their responses. I could have stopped asking questions there and allowed myself to believe that the reason was some religious principle about human dignity or the value of all human life, principles part of Lemoyne's heritage. Yet as an educator, I always want students to make the connection, so I asked why. Many times they would respond this way: they're against the death penalty because it's too easy. If someone has murdered another person, taking that person's life through lethal injection is too simple a solution. My students want the offender to stay alive, to think about, even be tormented by, what she or he has done and how wrong it was. They want that person to remember the pain and suffering he or she had caused to the victim's family and loved ones, and to the community. On the one hand, it seems that the motive in this response is one of vengeance or retribution. They want the person punished and to experience their punishment. Only a life of imprisonment and degradation is sufficient penalty for taking the life of an innocent person. Yet when I probe further, I find another motive expressed by most, though not all. There's a desire on their part to make sure that the offender not only is held accountable for his or her action, but also takes responsibility for it, to live consciously with the shame and pain they've inflicted on the victim and the community. This is the only way to make things right. While they're not consciously aware of it, they're expressing a notion of restorative justice, albeit a limited one. Pause the video and look at this case. How would you answer this question? Student opinions on this case have run the gamut. I imagine it's true for this class as well. Some might be totally against the death penalty, and so the answer would be simple. Others who might favor the death penalty in some cases might nod in this. They may say the person has paid his debt to society and so deserved to be let go. Still others might say he should have been executed given the heinous nature of his crime. No amount of good actions on his part would make up for what he did. Public opinion on the death penalty has been changing in recent years. While the majority are still in favor of the death penalty, that number has been going down, while those who are against it have increased their numbers. Of course, it's important to know what we are talking about when we're seeking to implement the death penalty. This clip from Dead Man Walking provides a glimpse into what lethal injection entails. If you know anything about the film, you know that the woman, Sister Helen Prejean, is trying to get Poncelet to come to grips with his crime to make some amends for it, which he finally does. The film also details the effects on the families and loved ones, both of the victims and the perpetrators. The final message is an anti-death penalty one.
Time to go, Poncelet. That's as far as you go, sister. You don't know Mama from time to time?
Yes, my mom word on good.
Got any last words, Bartolo? Yes, sir. Miss Delcourt, I don't want to leave this world and hate my heart. I ask your forgiveness for what I've done. It was a terrible thing I've done, taking your son away from you. But, Mr. Percy, I hope my death gives you some relief. I just want to say, I think killing is wrong. No matter who does it, whether it's me or y'all or your government.
The religious traditions we've been studying seem to agree that the death penalty has outlived its moral legitimacy. The Catholic bishops have their highest value being the respect for the sanctity of human life. They want order in society and justice by means of the law. However, they question whether or not such punishment continues to be needed. They reject the deterrence argument, noting how many studies show no correlation between having the death penalty and reductions in murder and violent crime. In fact, the opposite seems to be the case. They also note that the principle of justice, retribution, sometimes referred to as an eye for an eye, does not require death. We can still protect society and its members, and maybe even reform the criminal and integrate him back into society in some cases. They also note that the abolition of the death penalty allows society to break the cycle or spiral of violence about which we spoke before. But ultimately they recognize the dignity of all persons, even those who perpetrate evil. They are never beyond the grace of God. They emphasize a restorative view of justice, where the victims of crime are supported and the reformation and rehabilitation of criminals is sought. The Buddhist view wants to move in a restorative direction as well. Given the Buddhist notion of the interdependence of all things, they seek to find ways to heal the rift that murder and other violent crimes have caused. Like the Catholic emphasis on the dignity of all, Lloyd notes that all people, offenders and victims, have the same Buddha nature in them. All things are transient. There's no permanence, but a constant changing. With this notion, they're more receptive to the change even among criminals, if not in this life, at least in future lives. Thus they hold out for the possibility for reformation. Ultimately, Lloyd argues that Buddhist justice is compassionate for everyone involved and has a restorative focus. What is restorative justice? Howard Zare, a founder of the movement to introduce restorative justice principles into our criminal justice system, writes, "Restorative justice is a process to involve, to the extent possible, those who have a stake in a specific offense and to collectively identify and address harms, needs, and obligations in order to heal and put things as right as possible." Restorative justice advocates contrast their view with the prevailing view of retributive justice of the criminal justice system. To put this in context, I see the criminal justice view embodied in the television show Law and Order. Crime is a violation of the law in the state. In this view, while the victims are acknowledged, it's only because someone has broken the law through their victimization. Someone is guilty when they create a crime. The police investigates the crimes to determine who to blame. The guilty party is then brought to the district determined for appropriate conviction and punishment. Restorative justice looks at crime as a violation of people and relationships. We live in an interconnected world. One person's harmful actions creates a rift in relationships not only between those persons but also in community. Moreover, crime inflicts harms on victims which generates needs that may not always have been there before. Such violations do create guilt, but also obligations on the part of the offender to take responsibility for his or her offense and to make things right. It also places obligations on the part of the community to look at underlying causes and to provide for the needs of victims. Justice, therefore, involves all of those members to make things right. The victims, the offenders, and the community are stakeholders and can't be excluded from the justice process as they currently are. Again, to contrast the two views, they ask different questions. What laws have been broken? Criminal Statute 35, the Criminal Justice Code? Who did the crime? That's a fixed blame and guilty. What punishment do they deserve? What is the penalty? Restorative justice focuses on those who've been hurt. Victims, offenders, the community. They ask what the needs to the offenses generate on their part. They want to know whose obligations these are. It's interesting that after September 11th, there was a great deal of restorative justice concern for the victims' families. There was a strong recognition that many people in the community had been hurt by these actions, and there was attention to the needs of these people, and people willingly took on obligations to meet those needs, the state, individual donors, etc. Zaire uses the metaphor of a wheel, with putting right the wrongs and harms at the hub. This is what restorative justice process this is what drives the restorative justice process. There are 4 spokes in the wheel, focusing on the harms and needs the crime generates, looking at whose obligations it is to address and meet them, to involve all the stakeholders in the resolution, including victims, offenders, and communities, and doing this is an inclusive, collaborative process rather than an adversarial one. All of this is encircled in a genuine concern and respect for all parties involved. Most folks would see retributive justice and restorative justice not as opposites, but as a continuum, with restorative justice as an ideal. There are some commonalities between the two. In both, the goal is to vindicate the victim and the community, to even the score, if you would. Where they differ is on how we accomplish that. Both include a basic moral intuition that a balance has been thrown off by the wrongdoing. The victim deserves something, and the offender owes something. Both contend that there must be some proportionality between the offense and the response. It can't be too light nor too severe. Here again, they differ on the ways to right the balance and fulfill the obligations. The focus is to address the needs and harms in a more positive approach, so that the potential to affirm both the victim and the offender is there, as well as the possibility for the transformation in their lives. There are certain values that underlie restorative justice. For many advocates of restorative justice, these values are spiritual in nature, deriving from the best of the world's religious traditions. Most religious traditions are concerned with relationships between the human, the divine, and the human and the human, and the human and the non-human world. All have some vision about what the proper balance in those relationships is. Jewish and Christian traditions use the language of righteousness, which really means right relationships, treating others as you want to be treated. Buddhism speaks about compassion for all beings. On a social level, right relationships include some vision of a common good, where all members of the community thrive and flourish, where people fulfill their obligations and communities to one another. This is why moral and legal offenses are so problematic. They tear apart the fabric of the relationship and the community. In truth, damaged relationships are both a cause and an effect of the offense. Offenses indicate that something's already out of balance. Thus, religion seeks some means to restore those relationships, often through ritual and ethical practices. That begins with repentance, which includes a conscious accepting of responsibility for one's actions and the harm they have caused, kind of like what you saw with Sister Helen Prejean trying to get Poncelet to do. It also includes a willingness on the part of individuals and communities to expose themselves to critical scrutiny, to see the underlying cause of those actions, in order to make fundamental changes in the causes at both individual and communal levels. Such repentance leads to a desire to make restitution or reparation to the victim. Actions have consequences. They cause harm to the victim, to the offender, and to the community. They tear at the relationality, the web of relationships central to human experience. Religious traditions have long recognized that restoring those relationships requires action, ritual action, ethical action, economic action, or whatever action is necessary to open the possibility for reconciliation in the relationships. Recent Jewish celebration of Yom Kippur is a good example of how a religious tradition embodies this. Reconciliation isn't easy. Not only does it require repentance and restitution, it requires some measure of mercy and forgiveness on the part of the offended party. Let's face it, this is no easy task. In some instances, it may be beyond our human capacity to do. Yet the heart of the religious traditions of mercy, compassion, desire for reconciliation between the human and the sacred, between the human and the human. It's only through this path of repentance, reparation, and reconciliation can right relationship be restored. Can the wounds inflicted be healed? This is the path toward healing and transformation, the goals that religious traditions embody. Transformation happens because the roots of the causes of the problem within the individual and the community are recognized and changed. What's the relationship between restorative justice and the death penalty? Offensive to relationships is problematic. Murder is the most despicable. In some respects, it's the ultimate denial of the respect owed to all persons. There's no way to make right the crime of murder. We must protect the social fabric from those who will not acknowledge their crimes and use our criminal justice system to establish their guilt. Yet killing people to punish them must be avoided if there's another morally serious way to address their offense. A restorative justice approach suggests more can be and is being done to recognize survivors' needs and the needs of co-victims while holding offenders accountable for their actions. Taking their lives eliminates the possibility for transformation and healing for the victims, for the offenders, and for the community that restorative justice seeks.